Well, good morning, good day, good evening, everybody. I am standing in for Jared today, who is having a ball of a time surfing in the south of France. So we're thinking about you, Jared. And this is our first Crossplane community meeting since the 1.12 release, and the previous meeting was cancelled due to it conflicting with KubeCon. And so we've got quite a few things to go through. And as usual, please add any items to the agenda that you would like discussion, and we can get to those. We'll start off by just let me share my screen here. So we'll just recap. There was obviously, as I mentioned, we've seen the 1.12 being released. There was also a patch release followed up shortly after, and that was based on findings that we needed to fix things to the RBAC manager relating to permissions to allow for the access to service scope providers for provider configs. And there was also some utilization issues that was picked up. So that was released out, and that actually is a very welcome fix, because it opens up the path to installing less CRDs in Crossplane, and we'll more on that a little bit later. So as we're into the new release cycle, today we'll be going over kind of like what's on the roadmap for 1.13. We'll have a look at what's currently on the board, and I'll start off by opening the roadmap. And it's kind of like I've added a few things based on commitments that we've had from people who can work on certain things in this time frame. First up, installing fewer CRDs, the design proposal has been merged, and the proposed solution to break up large providers in service scope packages has been accepted, and that is now going forward. It's not going to, from a Crossplane point of view, there's nothing that needs to be done in 1.13 to accommodate this, and I'll share more about that a little bit later on. Then we're also looking to promote composition functions to beta. We're not certain this work will actually get to beta in the 1.13 release. There's quite a bit of things that need to be looked at, but I know Nick has mentioned that he'll be putting some time in on this over the next few weeks, and we'll see where we land with composition functions towards the end of 1.13. At least we should be able to address quite a few of these issues. Just begin here. And then we'll be working on promoting environment configs to V1 beta. There's a feature that's been getting a lot of usage in the community, and folks have expressed interest in moving this forward. So if any of you are using this and have some thoughts on things you'd like to see in there, make sure to get it in there before the work wraps up on that. And then we're looking at investing in improving the end-to-end integration testing for Crossplane. So right now, most of the testing is unit testing, and there's not a lot of end-to-end testing, which makes it difficult for the maintainers to just have confidence in merging new changes, especially things that touch areas of the code base that might not have been looked at in a while. And we believe that as Crossplane matures as a project, it's definitely time to invest in expanding on the end-to-end testing. So we've got Lavro and Predrag, who recently joined the Upbound team, will be investing some time into looking into this. They're fairly early on their kind of like investigation on this. They're evaluating the different approaches, and we'll put a proposal together soon for how they propose we tackle this. And then Philippe is continuing with the work he started on the composition validation. So he's already been implementing quite a few of the phase 2 improvements to extend the schema-aware validation, and we'll continue pushing that forward in the 1.13 timeframe. And there I go and close the wrong thing again. And then lastly, we're getting close to what seems to be alignment on the proposal for the ability to ignore changes on specific fields. And Lara also mentioned that he'll be looking to polish up the proposal over the next few days, and we should be able to get that merged soon as well. And implementation might make it in 1.13 as well. So this is currently work that people have kind of like committed to looking at over the next 3 months. If there is anything on here that or something you're not seeing on here that you really feel passionate about, you have an opportunity now to verbalize that. And also, you know, in the Crossplane Slack, you can reach out in the Crossplane owners channel for that as well. Anybody have any questions or feedback on the current roadmap commitment?
Hi, I have one question. It's Christopher.
Hey, Christopher.
If we're promoting the composition function and the environment configs to V1 beta 1, is it also possible then to downgrade Crossplane? So if we're bumping this in 13th version and we downgrade then Crossplane to the 12th version, because there is one issue in the community between version 11 and 10, it's not possible to downgrade Crossplane after you did the first upgrade. Because then in the CRD, there are 2 versions available and the old version of Crossplane is not aware of it. So it would be helpful if downgrading is possible if you're bumping the CRDs there.
Christopher, could you raise if there isn't one already, it would be helpful to have an issue on Crossplane about this general problem, not just the 1.11 to 1.10.
I send it the issue. It's 3859. Perhaps someone can.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm guessing from the brief sound of the description. All right, yeah, it would be. I haven't seen this issue yet. This is the first time seeing it. Just looking at it, the title says I can't go back from 1.11 to 1.10. It sounds like the actual underlying problem is when a new CID is added, you can't downgrade. So let's refactor this issue. I can maybe take care of this to track that, and then we can be aware of that problem in future upgrades and look into it. From the sound of things, this sounds like something that would affect any software that introduces a new CID version. So perhaps there's a pattern out there already for solving this.
Yeah, thanks. Overall, I like the idea, but this would be something I would cover also in this release then. Thanks.
Cool.
Anybody else have any other thoughts? All right. We'll open the board and just have a look at the work that is currently being earmarked for 1.13 overall. As a reminder, you know, roadmap items are mostly kind of like larger features that push the project you know, strategically forward, but that's only a small part of all the effort that goes into overall. If we look at things that are in review, package signature validation, I don't know, I don't see Jesse on the call today. So we'll see if we get an update from Jesse on that. I know this one, I believe Jared has already looked at. Yeah, and that should be closed soon as well. And I do that again. And can't use composition function to update XR. Let's just see here. It's in review currently. What is our pull request? Nick, I see you're reviewing this one, so that's great. Although I see Bradley hasn't responded in a while. Bradley's not on the call, so maybe we can ping him on that again. All right, and then let me just back here. Implementing image pool secrets for composition functions. This one has been around for a while as well. But I think that's part of the scope for maturing composition functions that we'll look at as well.
Yeah, someone has a pull request open that implements this. That's been open for a while. To be fair, Andrew, I don't see him on this call. I did a pretty thorough review yesterday, and unfortunately, it still needs a fair bit of work. So slow going there, but it's happening. Yeah, just while I'm talking, just want to make sure we don't misrepresent how much I'm going to be working on composition functions. I definitely was planning to take this week to do a PR or two, not. Don't be under the impression that Nick's just going to be working on composition functions that will have an beta by V1.1 for you or something like that.
Yeah, no, I definitely didn't want to create the expectation that Nick will be focusing on it for a lot. And then add credential helpers support for composition functions. I assume that will be part of the composition functions work. And then I know, Hassan, you mentioned that you had a look at this one specifically around a server-side solution for this, which isn't trivial, and it'll probably need a little bit more time before we get to a fix for that.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. In progress, as we've talked about earlier, Philippe is on the composition validation, and ignore changes proposal is getting close to being finalized. All right. Moving on. We've talked about the Crossplane milestones. Nobody raised any other priorities for today. Let's move on to provider releases and investments. So there's been a recent releases over the last, what's now been 4 weeks instead of 2 weeks since we skipped the previous meeting. So provider AWS 0390 was released. Provider Ansible 050 was released last week, I believe. And there was a round of releases of Upbound's providers as well. And then update on implementing smaller service scope providers. So now with the design doc merged, Upbound is in the process of building service scope provider packages for the AWS, Azure, and GCP providers, and aiming to make release candidate images available for testing around the 16th of May. Team is busy finalize. They've kind of like done an initial validation to prove that it works at a technical level, and now just finishing up all the build pipelines and optimizing the images and the build process to make sure this works, and doing some testing. And we should have release candidate packages ready for people to test and play around with. And if you're interested in testing these out and able to provide feedback, please join the SIG channel in the community Slack, so we can keep you up to date on progress there. On the vendor update side, so as I mentioned already, we're busy working on promoting schema-aware composition validation, as well as the improved end-to-end integration testing. And right, community topics and questions. So on the content side, there's been quite a bit of content, obviously, thanks to KubeCon. I've listed all the talks that I could find that mentioned Crossplane, and most of them have videos uploaded to YouTube now already. There's also monitoring as code with Crossplane, a blog post that Matthias wrote earlier this month, last month, and build a modern platform with Crossplane, Anthos, and Argo CD. And then also community member Salaboy published a kind of like a cloud native snapshot publication that he's doing right now that also covers Crossplane and Upbound in there. It is behind a paywall, so I'll just mention that. Manabu just added an article here. Let me just
sorry, it's ugly.
Yeah,
it
no worries.
Does look like Crossplane and GitOps and all that stuff.
Cool. Thank you very much. And then, all right. I do want to encourage folks, if you see articles mentioning Crossplane or talking about it, do post it in an announcements channel in Slack. It's a great way to bring some, get some eyeballs on these articles. This is just a reminder from Jared. He also posted this in the Slack, community Slack earlier, where we're looking at the thumbs up reactions on issues to help gauge interest or issues that impact the community and that where the community has an interest in. It might seem trivial to put a little thumbs up on something and so on, but it does actually give signal, and it helps in helping understand what is important to the community and prioritizing the work like that. So encouraging folks to start engaging with issues that they feel are important to them or have an interest in, and add a thumbs up there. And then I also called out Nick's message in Slack earlier this week around, or yesterday actually. Nick, do you want to verbalize it around the RBAC manager moving to basic rather than advanced?
Yeah, it's pretty much what it says there. So please respond on that issue and let me know if you do use the RBAC roles that Crossplane creates in each namespace. Or let me know if you don't. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please open up that issue and just be like, I don't know what this functionality is. That will help us decide whether we can turn it off or not.
All right. Thanks, Carlos, for adding more content there. And then on to PRs to discuss, or that needs attention. So Stephen, you're on the call today. You opened the PR recently to add volume and volume mount support to controller config. And this is one that is interesting one, because obviously the controller config API has been deprecated. There's a desire to move to PRI in the future. And we don't actually have a commitment from somebody to work on that at the moment. Would you like to take it further and just share your use case there?
Yeah, what happens here in the use case is that if you're running a provider pod and you have something like a proxy in between it and the cloud provider, which a lot of large enterprises have, it's not easy right now to be able to inject custom CA certificates into a provider. If you try to modify the deployment, the Crossplane controller will go in and rewrite the deployment over you. So I'm not sure if anybody in the community has any workarounds. I saw some like Caverno policies, but yeah, so this is just basically kind of mapping the same data structures that are in a deployment and adding that to the controller config.
Dan, you had a, sorry, Dan, it's good to see your face here. You added a comment actually that you were not in favor of expanding the deprecated API. You want to add something here?
Yeah, it's kind of a mix of like both practical because it's already a really big API, and also just from like a messaging perspective that we don't want to be encouraging like further use of this. But it's a very valid statement or concern, right, that we haven't made progress on the PRI thus far. So if we are going to, as I kind of like recommended there, prohibit expanding this API, I think that we should start some active work on defining what the roadmap is for the PRI, because it's not really fair to leave users kind of like in between there. I think I just saw it in the chat. I'm unfortunately on my phone today, but it looked like someone mentioned mutation webhook, which I also believe would work in this case. So that might be something to explore as a workaround in the short term. But regardless of how that's worked around, we should go ahead and develop a plan for making progress. And I'm happy to participate in leading some of that.
Did you just put up your hand to drive that design proposal forward?
I think I put up my hand to have a discussion with some folks about the driving it forward. Want to make sure that folks are all represented there. So I won't necessarily commit to saying like, hey, we're going to drive this forward, but I will commit to getting folks together to start talking about what the course of action is there.
So I want to be careful on this one. My understanding is that for us at Upbound, we have like multiple customers who are blocked by this at the moment, and it's like a 4-line change or something like that in the controller config. So while I understand the sort of I'm usually very much on the side of let's not do the wrong thing API wise. If we're talking a quarter or more, so like we don't have PRI on our roadmap at all at the moment. So I don't think we can go back to our customers and just say, sorry, folks, can't be there for a long time. Maybe that means we book a setup out to distro or something like that, or maybe the Kaiberto thing works out. But I get that we don't want to send a message that we're adding more stuff, but there's already a whole bucket of stuff in there. We've already said, yeah, we know this is not the plan. We know we don't want to go forward here, and it's add like one more knob to it. So part of me is just like, let's just add the one more knob and buy ourselves a bit more time.
I feel like this is a pretty good use case for a downstream distro, like a pretty good example of being able to get it in quickly, because even if we do add it right now, it in theory isn't going to be an upstream release for a bit anyway, since we just had a recent release. So I would obviously I don't have a say on how this works anymore, but I would advocate for the downstream implementation if that works for folks.
Yeah, my gut feeling is we're being a little bit overly philosophical rather than pragmatic here, but I'll sort of defer to I'll chat to the folks at Upbound and see how urgent this is and what the options are.
What would be the benefit of it going upstream right now if it's not going to be included in a release for a bit anyway, and this is an urgent concern for customers?
I mean, we can always kind of release a like UXP or whatever as well for Upbound folks separately. I think what I'm saying is like it at least creates like a forking point where there's just like one more place where like our distro is diverging. I guess like if this was like a big bunch of functionality going into controller config, it was like really complicated and adding a bunch more stuff, I'd be like, whoa, yeah, let's pump the brakes. But controller config already has like what, n out of the X fields on deployment, and it's adding like one more. I don't know. I don't think we really need to debate it on this call. Like I don't agree, but
Anybody else in the community have some thoughts on this topic?
What's the story with PRI?
I think the current story is there isn't a roadmap in place for it. So if we're going to be denying changes like this, then I think that's at the very least something that needs to be put out and shared with the community. Because it's not really fair to say like, hey, we're not going to unblock this use case and we don't have a plan for how we're going to do it.
Yeah, that's the feeling that I have, the conundrum, like, oh, we're not setting this because we have a new API that we want to do in the future sometime in 2028. Sorry.
Yeah, I feel like we had a joke when I worked at Google, which I'm sure anyone who's worked at Google has heard, which is there's the way that doesn't work yet, there's the way that's deprecated. Like, people
You're in catch 22, right?
Right.
Yeah,
I really like the idea of PRI, but it is just like an issue at the moment. It's not even like a one pager. It's kind of a very broad future direction to go look into. So my hunch is that it's probably going to be a while unless someone steps up and is like, I really feel passionate about this and I'm going to drive it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should have that conversation basically before we make a decision here. Because if we do have that
policy decision, right? Because you open the door. Then you open the door next month, and then next month to another change.
Right, exactly. Like we should have a conversation about whether we're going to commit to committing to this thing, basically, before we make a decision here. And I think we can do that pretty eminently. So I'm happy to be getting that set up.
It
And
sounds
in the
like
meantime, if
we'll-
people are suffering and they're like, we also have to be fair, right? Not everyone knows when we throw like terms or like solutions, assume that everybody knows what we're talking about. But if somebody wants to explain like what a small emission webhook would look like with a snippet of code or an example using Caverno, like to folks that like are happy with that solution, is that they just don't know, right? Enough Kubernetes to figure out like, oh, there's this thing called like, extensions that you can add to pods and to add things to pods that certain amount of the community are like, that's easy. Like we do it every day. And the other community, like, I don't know, I have no idea what you're talking about what is a mutation webhook, or what is, how do you spell Caverno, or like a policy thing, mutating thing.
Yeah, the other thing to keep in mind here is that like we've got this type of controller config, and it basically has a template for deployment in it, and it's got, I don't know what the actual numbers are, but it's got 15 of the 50 fields that a deployment has in it. So while we're in this interim period, if we're saying it goes in Caverno or it goes somewhere else, then we need to communicate to people this is a deprecated API. It's
Yep.
15 fields. If it's not one of those fields, then you've got to go do this other thing as well. So a lot of folks are going to end up being like, okay, I've got my controller config to specify these 10 fields, and I've got my mutating admission control webhook to specify this other field. And like it does put people in a pretty sort of gross middle ground while we're waiting.
Yeah. And also specifying the version, right? With these type of things, like the mutation webhook may not work in the next version if changes are made or something, right? So they always have to double check that what they're mutating or the way they're mutating. Yeah. That was my 2 cents. Sorry.
It sounds like the Crossplane maintainers will discuss the right path forward and communicate on the PR as necessary. All right. Any last minute discussions anybody would like to bring forward? Feels like a sufficiently awkward long pause there. And with that, we'll wrap up today's meeting. Thank you for joining, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.